The most dangerous thing is to be unconscious of your own shadow. Carl Jung wrote that. And if you have ever felt inexplicably drawn to someone who later consumed you, someone who seemed to see you more clearly than anyone else, who held you with such intensity that you mistook their grip for love, then Jung was talking about you, about both of you, about the ancient invisible contract signed between light and darkness before you even knew you were in the room. You felt it, didn't you? That pull, that magnetic certainty, that terrifying sense that this person understood your soul in a way no one ever had. And then, slowly, so slowly you barely noticed, you began to lose pieces of yourself. First a preference, then a boundary, then your voice, then your memory of who you were before them. The light in you didn't die, it was fed upon, carefully, deliberately, by someone who had learned, somewhere deep in the architecture of their wounds, how to survive by draining what others carry in abundance. This is not a story about victims and villains. It is deeper than that. Carl Jung spent decades mapping the unconscious terrain where these encounters are born, long before the word narcissist entered pop psychology, long before empaths began identifying themselves on the internet. He called it the drama of the shadow, the part of ourselves we cannot see, the part we refuse to integrate, the part that pulls us toward exactly the wrong person for exactly the right unconscious reason. What you'll find here is not a list of red flags. It is something more disturbing and more useful, a map of your own interior. Because understanding why narcissists target empaths isn't really about them. It's about the unlit rooms inside you, the ones you've never been willing to enter, and why those rooms keep attracting guests who have no intention of leaving quietly. Now let's go inside together. There is a paradox nobody talks about. The person most capable of love is the person most susceptible to being used by someone who cannot love at all. Think about that. Let it land. You were not chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were extraordinarily alive, capable of feeling what most people numb themselves against, capable of holding another person's pain as if it were your own, capable of seeing beauty and potential in ruins. These are not liabilities, they are gifts. But gifts, in an unexamined psyche, become open doors that the wrong people know how to walk through. Jung introduced the concept of the persona, the mask we construct for the world, and its counterpart, the shadow. Everything we suppress, deny, and exile from our conscious identity. Here is what almost no one says plainly. Empaths and narcissists are, psychologically, mirror images of the same fundamental wound. The empath suppresses their need for power, their anger, their self-assertion. They push these qualities so far into shadow that they believe they simply have none. The narcissist, inversely, suppresses their vulnerability, their shame, their terror of being ordinary. They bury these qualities so deeply that they appear to the outer world as invulnerable, exceptional, magnetic. When these two psychologies meet, something happens that feels like recognition. And in a sense, it is. Each person is encountering the lost half of themselves, projected outward, walking toward them across a room. The empath looks at the narcissist and sees strength they have disowned, certainty they were never permitted to carry, a self that moves through the world without apologizing for the space it occupies. And it feels in that moment like coming home to a part of yourself you didn't know was missing. We cannot change anything unless we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses, Jung wrote. And this is precisely the tragedy. The empath sees in the narcissist the strength they have buried. The narcissist sees in the empath the tenderness they have armored over. For a brief, intoxicating period, both people feel complete. Both people feel found. This is not love. It is mutual projection. It is two unconscious minds attempting to complete themselves through each other. The empath enters the relationship believing they have finally met someone who sees them. What they have actually met is someone who sees their usefulness. The narcissist's gaze, which the empath experiences as understanding, is in reality assessment, not of who you are, but of what you carry that they need. Your warmth, your patience, your endless willingness to explain yourself, to justify their actions, to stay when every rational signal says leave. And why do you stay? Because leaving feels like abandonment, and abandonment is your shadow. The wound beneath the wound, the thing you pushed underground long before this person arrived. You were taught, perhaps very early, that love requires sacrifice, that being good means being endlessly available, that your discomfort matters less than someone else's need. You learned to scan the emotional temperature of every room before you entered it. You learned to anticipate, to soothe, to disappear in the ways that mattered most. This skill, this exquisite, exhausting sensitivity, made you invaluable to someone who feeds on exactly that. The narcissist did not create your wound. They simply knew, without conscious thought, how to find it in the dark. You were chosen not despite your depth, but because of it, and because that depth had never learned to say no. Here is something that will disturb you, and I want it to. The attraction was real. The chemistry was not manufactured. The electricity you felt in the first weeks, the sense that this person unlocked something in you no one else had touched, that was genuine. And it was the most dangerous thing that could have happened. Jung mapped two figures that live in the unconscious and shape every intimate relationship. The anima, the inner feminine carried in the psyche of a man, and the animus, the inner masculine carried in the psyche of a woman. These are not merely metaphors. They are active, autonomous forces. They dream in us. They project onto others. They reach outward into the world searching for their own completion. And when they find someone who matches their image even partially, the result is what we call falling in love. It feels cosmic. It feels fated. And it frequently is exactly that, a fate constructed from unconscious need. The empath carries in their shadow the qualities of the archetype they have most suppressed. If you have lived your life in service to others, your shadow animus or anima holds the fierce, self-directed, even ruthless energy you could never claim as your own. And then a narcissist walks into the room, commanding, certain, moving through the world as if they own it. And something in you recognizes that quality with an almost physical shock, because it is yours. It belongs to you. You left it underground years ago, and here it is, walking around in someone else's body. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, Jung observed. But what happens when one of the substances has no intention of being transformed? When one party is engaged in projection, while the other is engaged in extraction. The narcissist is frequently experienced, especially in the beginning, as someone who gives you permission to be more, louder, freer, less apologetic. They model a confidence that feels liberating to someone who has always shrunk to fit the comfort of others. You mistake their grandiosity for strength. You mistake their certainty for wisdom. You mistake their hunger, their relentless, bottomless hunger, for passion. Hunger is not passion. Hunger is need. The narcissist's need, though it wears the mask of desire, is something far older and colder. It is the infant's terror of dissolution, the child's scream for mirroring that was never answered. The developmental wound of narcissistic personality is rooted in a very early failure, the failure of a caregiver to reflect back the child's true self. What emerged instead was a false self, brilliant, armored, and perpetually ravenous for the validation that never came at the source. The empath, shaped by their own early wounds into someone exquisitely attuned to the emotional needs of others, is neurologically and psychologically primed to respond to exactly this kind of hunger. They feel it. They feel it as a call. They believe, at a level far beneath rational thought, that if they can only love this person correctly, completely, perfectly, without reservation, the hunger will finally be satisfied. It will not. This is the trap beneath the trap. Not cruelty, impossibility. You cannot fill a void from outside. You cannot love someone into wholeness they have never sought. And yet the empath, whose deepest belief is that love conquers all, whose shadow tells them they are only valuable when they are needed, will continue trying long after every other sign says stop. The invisible hunger of the narcissist and the invisible terror of the empath create a system, a closed loop, an ecosystem of mutual damage dressed in the language of love. Both people are, in the deepest sense, trying to heal something through each other that cannot be healed this way. And the tragedy is not that one person is evil. The tragedy is that both people are lost, but only one of them is paying the full cost of that lostness. What you experienced as chemistry was the collision of two unhealed psychologies, and what felt like recognition was your own unlived self, reflected back at you in someone who had no intention of ever truly seeing you. There is a contract you signed. You signed it in silence in childhood, before you understood what a contract was. And every relationship you enter either honors it or challenges it. The empath who keeps finding themselves with narcissistic people has not been unlucky. They have been loyal to a wound so old they have mistaken it for identity. This is what Jung called the shadow contract, the unconscious agreement we make with the world based on the emotional logic we absorbed in our earliest relationships. If you learned as a child that your needs were secondary, that your emotions were too much, that being loved required constant performance, you carry a shadow contract that says, I must earn my place, I must be indispensable, I must not ask for too much, or I will be abandoned. The narcissist, operating from their own shadow contract, I must never show weakness, I must be admired at all costs, I must control the terms of any relationship or I will be destroyed, encounters the empath's agreement and recognizes it with the precision of someone who has navigated these waters before. Not consciously, not with premeditated malice, but through a felt sense, refined over years, of where the vulnerabilities are. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate, Jung said. This may be his most devastating insight applied to the narcissist-empath dynamic. Neither party fully knows what they are doing. The empath genuinely believes they are helping, loving, supporting. The narcissist genuinely believes they deserve what they are taking. Both are actors in a play whose script was written before either of them was old enough to understand the stage. And the performance continues, night after night, with all the conviction of people who have never once been handed a different script. The shadow contract manifests in patterns you recognize if you're willing to look. The empath who always explains themselves before their feelings have finished being felt, who justifies their pain before expressing it, who apologizes for having needs and then feels guilty for the apology. These are not personality flaws. They are loyalty to a very old story about what makes a person safe to love. Here is where it becomes subtle and important. The empath's wound is not passivity, it is something more nuanced, the refusal to claim their own darkness. Empaths tend to carry the moral high ground in these relationships. They see themselves as the one who loves more, tries harder, suffers longer, and often this is accurate. But what they rarely examine is what this story does for them, how it allows them to remain in familiar suffering without confronting the uncomfortable truth that they have choices. That staying is itself a choice. That the relationship fulfills something even as it destroys them. The shadow of the empath is not cruelty. It is the addiction to being needed. It is the way that suffering, when it becomes familiar, begins to feel like love. It is the belief, buried so deep it never gets articulated, that a quiet, ordinary life without someone to rescue, without a chaos to metabolize, without the gravitational pull of another person's desperate need, would somehow be emptier than the pain they already know. The narcissist is not what traps the empath. The empath's unlived life traps the empath. The relationship with the narcissist is, in the language of the psyche, an externalization of an internal conflict. The conflict between the self who wants to be free and the self who is taught that freedom is dangerous. Breaking the shadow contract requires something more radical than leaving a relationship. It requires leaving the identity the relationship was built to protect. It requires encountering your own darkness, not with shame, but with the kind of ruthless compassion that Jung called the foundation of genuine individuation. You didn't stay because you were weak. You stayed because you were faithful to a wound older than this relationship, and calling that wound by its name is the beginning of everything. Everything you've heard up to this point has been diagnosis. Now comes something else. Jung never believed that psychological insight existed merely to explain suffering. He believed it existed to transform it. The concept he devoted his life to, individuation, is not about becoming invulnerable. It is not about becoming hard or strategic or emotionally defended. It is about becoming whole. And wholeness, in the Jungian sense, means something that empaths often find terrifying. It means claiming the parts of yourself you have condemned. What lives in the shadow of the empath? anger. Not the anxious, apologetic expression of frustration that empaths permit themselves, but genuine, clean, self-respecting anger. The kind that says, "This is not acceptable." The kind that doesn't require the other person's agreement before it can exist. Empaths are often deeply afraid of their own anger. They have learned, sometimes from violent families, sometimes from simply being the sensitive child in a room that couldn't hold sensitivity, that anger makes you dangerous, makes you bad, makes you the thing you feared. But anger, in the Jungian framework, is not pathology. It is information. It is the psyche's signal that something of value has been violated. An empath who cannot access their anger cannot protect themselves, and an empath who cannot protect themselves will keep finding people who require no protective barriers because they've already decided the empath's interior is a space they are entitled to enter. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Jung said. And becoming who you truly are, for the empath, requires a revolution in self-conception, from caregiver to sovereign. From the one who holds space for everyone else's pain to the one who can hold their own pain long enough to understand what it is telling them. This is not a call to become less sensitive. Sensitivity is not the problem. Sensitivity without boundaries is the problem. Sensitivity without self-knowledge is the problem. Sensitivity that has been trained to face outward, toward the needs of others, but has never been turned inward toward the honest inventory of one's own unconscious. That is the problem. The empath who has mastered the art of reading everyone else's emotional weather, but cannot name what they themselves feel in any given moment, has developed a superpower in one direction while remaining entirely defenseless in the other. The process of individuation is not comfortable. It requires you to meet the parts of yourself that the relationship with the narcissist actually revealed. Not what they showed you about them, but what the entire experience illuminated about the unexamined architecture of your own psyche. Why did this feel like love? What does that tell you about how you understand love? What did you overlook, explain away, rehabilitate in your mind that another version of you, a version rooted more fully in their own reality, would have recognized as a boundary violation long before it became a defining wound? There is a moment in every empath's healing when the narrative flips, when the story stops being what was done to me and becomes what do I now choose to do with what I know. This is not a rejection of the pain, it is its transformation. This is alchemy, in the original Jungian sense, the base metal of suffering becoming, through the fire of consciousness, something that can illuminate rather than merely hurt. The narcissist who entered your life was, in the deepest and most uncomfortable sense, a messenger. Not a benevolent one, not a safe one, but a messenger nonetheless. Carrying, in the violence of their need, the specific shape of the boundary you hadn't yet built, the anger you hadn't yet claimed, the self you hadn't yet decided to protect. They arrived because some part of your psyche, operating below the level of your awareness, was finally ready to be forced toward a confrontation it had avoided for years. You are not required to thank them for this. You are only required to use what they showed you. Reclaiming the self means developing what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposites simultaneously. To be both tender and firm, to love deeply and still refuse to be consumed. To feel everything, as empaths do, and to remain grounded enough in your own reality that another person's projected darkness cannot replace your inner light. This is not a destination, it is a practice, a daily return to the interior, a daily inquiry into what you are doing and why. A daily choice to bring consciousness to the places where unconsciousness once ruled. The wound was the door, and on the other side of it, if you are willing to walk through, is the version of yourself that no one will ever be able to use again. There is a particular silence that falls after understanding. Not the silence of emptiness, not the silence of shock or of grief, though all of those may come in their own time. This is a different kind of silence, the silence of recognition. The silence of a person who has just seen something they cannot unsee, who is standing at the border of the person they were and the person they are in the process of becoming. This is the silence Jung describes at the deepest moments of individuation. Not absence, but fullness. Not the end of something, the very still center of a beginning. If something in this video landed in a way that felt uncomfortably personal, if you found yourself recognizing patterns you have lived rather than merely observed, then you are not a casualty. You are a person on the threshold. The recognition itself is the first act of a different kind of story. Here is what I want to leave you with. The empath who has been targeted, slowly eroded by someone who took their tenderness as a license, that person carries, in the precise shape of their suffering, the exact contours of their unlived strength. Every boundary that was violated shows you where a boundary needs to be built. Every time you stayed when you should have left, the part of you that knew you should leave was watching, gathering evidence, waiting for the moment you were finally ready to listen. Every time you loved someone more than you loved yourself, your own soul was filing a quiet objection, patient in the way that deep things are patient, certain that eventually the message would be received. You are not too much. You were too much for the wrong person, which is an entirely different thing. You are not broken by what happened. You are unfinished, and unfinished is not damage. Unfinished is the state of everything still growing. Jung believed, above all else, that the psyche wants to heal, that it moves, when given the conditions, inevitably toward wholeness, that the same depth of feeling which made you vulnerable to being consumed is the very quality that will carry you, if you choose it, all the way through the shadow, through the integration of what you've denied, through the rebuilding of a self that is genuinely yours. The soul of the empath is not a wound, it is a lantern. It simply needed to learn that its light belongs first and most importantly to itself. If this opens something in you, leave it in the comments. Not a polished thought, not a conclusion, whatever is actually moving through you right now. This channel exists for exactly those moments, and if you are just arriving here, there is more. There is always more. Come find it.